Welcome to section 4.6. I'll give you a second to, or pause the video at this time. I guess I need to learn to use the right phrasing. Pause the video at this time and go ahead and copy the board. All right, today we're going to look at special products of binomials very specifically. So the first one, you don't need to know what these are called. The first one is what happens when we're basically multiplying something that looks super similar, except for it goes from one of them has a positive and one of them has a negative. And it turns out that when we do this, you'll see in our first example, our final answer only ends up with 2 terms and not 3 terms. And this again is going to be a big part of our factoring unit, which is going to come up very quickly in chapter 5. So let's FOIL this out and see what we get. We're going to get x times x, which is x squared. We're going to do the outside piece, so minus 5x. The inside piece is a positive 5x. And positive 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. So we have x squared. Oh my gosh, look what happens right here. The negative and the positive are going to cancel each other out. So we end up with just 2 terms. Now, after you go through this process several times, you'll start to trust it, and maybe you won't even get to the point where you write that down because you know automatically it's going to cancel out. So, and then the more you know and the more you're kind of certain about, the more you kind of can skip that step because you know it up here, and it saves you work in writing it down. Let me illustrate. Same idea. The only thing I switched, I made it a little bit more complicated looking. I added a coefficient here, and I added a higher exponent there. We're still going to FOIL. 4x squared times 4x squared is 16x to the 4th. The outside piece would be a positive 12x squared. The inside piece would be a negative 12x squared. So the back would be negative 3 times positive 3, which would be a negative 9. The middle 2 terms are opposites. So they're going to cancel each other out. Final answer. And we're done. You might even go, maybe you have room off to the side. I know if you copied all this beautifully, you probably don't have a lot of space to maybe add. So maybe somewhere else. Just off to the side. What do I mean when I say you'll get to the point where you're confident enough to kind of skip that? Well, maybe you'll look at a problem like this when you're going through your homework, and you'll say, okay, that's a plus 8, that's a minus 8. I know those middle terms are going to drop out because that's going to give me a negative 8. That's going to give me a positive 8x. And so maybe you'll just jump straight to there. And you'll know it's the first 2, it's a squared, that times that, and you'll know that it's just the back 2, positive b times negative b, and that will be your final answer. And it just saves you that step of making it a 2-step problem to a 1-step problem. If you like to write it out every time, that's fabulous. You do what works and what's right for you. All right, what's different between my left-hand column and my right-hand column is this. Here we have 1 positive and 1 negative. In these examples over here, and first of all, you don't need to memorize that. That's in your book, and it comes in kind of handy when we come to factoring, but I don't focus on it overly much. If you've taken another math class where they've really hit that more extreme, then that's fine. There's no problem there. But I'm going to show you how to do it kind of the same way we've always FOILed. So what this means is 5x plus 2 times 5x plus 2. When you're squaring something, you're multiplying it by itself. It does not mean square the first guy and square the second guy. That is not what it means. So, before I continue with that example, I cannot stress this enough. And when we add more complicated math concepts to this concept, some of you will revert back to doing this. This does not mean a squared plus b squared. It means a plus b times a plus b, which means you have to FOIL. And then you will end up with a middle term, like we found out when you FOIL normally, you end up with a trinomial with 3 terms. 1, 2, 3 terms. It just so happens that it lands in a pattern. Okay, back to this. I would write this huge. It does not mean that. It does mean this. So remind yourself of that as much as needed. Okay, so now that we know that, and I've kind of touched on that, it's just FOIL. 5x times 5x is 25x squared. The outside piece is 10x. The inside piece is 10x. And the last piece is a plus 4. So 25x squared plus 20x plus 4, and we're done. So what is this 2AB reference? Well, if you wanted to learn a shortcut and another little pattern and you like that, then that's fine. Please notice that 20 is twice the product of those two numbers' product. So 2 times 5 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20. 2 times A times B. And if that's just, whew, that is too much for you to remember, you don't need to know that. You can just FOIL it like we always have. All right, let's try one when there's a negative right there. So again, I'm going to write that binomial twice. 10x minus 3 times 10x minus 3. So 10 times 10 is 100, x squared, minus 30x minus 30x. See, that number gets repeated, so it ends up being doubled, plus 9. 100x squared minus, minus 60x plus 9. Final answer. This is twice what 3 times 10 is. So that's where that comes from once again. I'm not going to give you any tries. You'll see lots of practice in your homework. There's some additional practice in your book, so I think this one's pretty basic. So good luck with your homework once again, and stay tuned for 4.7, because I think I'm going to just keep going and wrap up our chapter here today.